The purpose of biological warfare is more of a state agenda. Bioterrorism, by contrast, is the use of biologic agents in furtherance of political or social objectives. The goal is to terrorize. A small amount of relatively unrefined material may be sufficient to achieve the desired outcome, and the delivery system can be less sophisticated. In 1996, we had a laboratory technician in Dallas that put Shigella into muffins in the cafeteria at the School of Medicine. And that was a form of biologic terrorism, or a biocrime, depending on how you want to sort it out. But if the purpose is to create terror, and it doesn't take a lot of material to terrorize. In the anthrax attack in the United States, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but the material that was produced, the approximately 4 grams or so of material that was produced, was the product of 35 different fermentation runs in 2 U.S. biologic weapons facilities to make enough material that killed 5 people. 5 people. That same year, we had 40,000 people die of influenza in the United States. 5 people died. But the amount of terror that was created was huge. It was global. The purpose of biologic terrorism is to terrorize. It's not to kill. You don't have to kill many people. This is what we have to guard against. This is the thing that we have to protect against. It's not this. This is what we train for. This is what we practice for. We talk about if someone had 50 kilograms of anthrax spores and they released that on Washington, D.C. on a cloudless, moonless night with just the right humidity and just the right wind direction, it would kill 200,000 people. 50 kilograms of anthrax spores you are not going to make in your garage. That's something that has to be done at the state level. The purpose of that is not to terrorize. It doesn't take a lot to terrorize. Biologic terrorism is different. It's fundamentally different. And I think the reason I want us to talk about this is because this is where we're going to play a role. We can't do a lot about this. Governments can do a lot about this, right? But we can have a major role to play in that. And that's why I think we need to be more sensitive to what the issues are. So, where do these agents come from? Where do those biologic materials come from? If you're going to start this, you have to start with something, we say something that goes bump in the night, right? Where do we get that material? So we can just shout these out, right? Just where do you think they come from?
Laboratory.
Grocery?
Laboratory.
I'm sorry, laboratory. My grocery store, perhaps. Your laboratory. Have you not seen the inside of my refrigerator?
Soil.
I haven't seen it yet.
Soil.
Everywhere.
Soil.
Soil. Ah. Anybody else?
Air.
Air.
Natural agents like water.
Natural
The
agents like
shellfish
water.
toxin, the pelagic shellfish toxin from the
Right.
algae.
So we spend a lot of time in the U.S. putting up guns and gates and guards around these sources of materials, and we are very good at accounting, because if one vial out of 1,000 gets misplaced, you would just go crazy about this, right? But most of these materials are naturally occurring endemic diseases that can be obtained from a hospital or clinic laboratory. If you want Lassa or Ebola, go to Sierra Leone, go to any hospital clinic and pick up some bloody gauze out of the trash can, and you can isolate Lassa or Ebola. If you want anthrax, go anywhere along the Chisholm Trail in the United States where we used to drive cattle. You can stick a dirt in the ground, a spoon in the ground, and you can come up with anthrax spores. You could go to the former Soviet Union where there are annual outbreaks of plague, or to Arizona for that matter, where there are annual outbreaks of plague. Or you can go isolate monkeypox from any one of a number of places in Africa. These, you don't have to go through extraordinary measures to get these materials. They're available. They're also can be purchased from commercial repository, right? So Iraq's entire biologic weapons program came from the ATCC. They simply wrote and acquired the materials and they were shipped to them. We don't do that anymore, by the way, but there are commercial repositories. They can be traded, stolen, or obtained gratis from other research, clinical, veterinary laboratories, or scientists. Because some of these materials, if they're not select agents, are shipped back and forth around the world all the time. And some countries have more restrictions than others on the transport of infectious materials. but they're just not that hard to obtain. So at the end of the day, having that starting material is just not that hard to get. And so that makes our job particularly difficult in terms of playing a role in preventing dual use. So in the US, we have come up with this system called the select agent list. Now, the evolution of the select agent list is interesting because it came originally, we didn't actually have much of a list until the anthrax attack. And then the CDC and the Department of Human Services got very concerned, rightfully so, and they started to put together a list of restricted agents, things that had the potential to be used for biological terrorism. And they went to the US military and they said, well, give us your list, because they'd studied this for a long time, and that was the beginning. We started that list as a list of things that had a history of either having been examined or prepared in the former Soviet Union or in the United States during the Cold War and during the Cold War and before all the treaties that required us to destroy our offensive materials, and that was the beginning of the list. The list has subsequently grown. There are now 86 things on the list. And so what's happened is the list has now morphed from a list that was about things that could be used for weapons or terror to things that now represent major public health threats. So for instance, we just added something to the list. We just added SARS to the list, right? Well, the probability that anyone is going to use SARS as a biologic agent or a biologic terrorism agent is like -12 because it's too hard to grow. You can't keep it alive in the laboratory, much less keep it alive so you can do something with it. But it's an important public health threat because it has epidemic potential and there are no vaccines. So the list is transforming before our eyes to become not just about agents that have potential for biologic warfare or bioterrorism, to become something that is more of a public health issue. So we're going to do an exercise here, and I want to have you address two questions, and I'll put the list back up. One question is, what organisms should be added to or deleted from the select agent list? We're going to take about 10 minutes to work on this, right? And the second question is, does a select agent list make us more or less safe? Okay, so what should be added, what should be subtracted, and does having that list make us more safe or less safe? So this is the list. I realize it's small. I'll see if I can make it a little larger.